bringing you episode 3 of the Wellbeing Coaches podcast. We talk today to Dr. Luke McCabe, health, performance and longevity coach, ex-international rugby player, ex-bodybuilder, and to throw into the mix, an ultra marathon athlete. We talk about that a bit later on in the podcast, but well worth a listen to if you're currently a personal trainer or you're just starting out on your fitness journey. Luke, to Wellbeing podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on. I want you to kind of introduce yourself, who you are, what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Really great to be on here, mate. Massive privilege. So my original degree a long time ago was in chiropractic. But since then, I've just evolved with education and that. And presently, I'm just finishing a fellowship, like a consultancy in precision and genomic medicine. But what I do is, the whole point of what I do is aim for what I call whole human optimization. So I've got a company called the Biohacking Executive. And then what I do is I take sort of high achievers, high-end execs, etc., who want to take their whole body, sort of mind, body, spirit, life, etc., from point A to point B, and just create like a version 2.0 of themselves. And we just do that with 6 pillars. So basically, fundamentals of immunity, gut health, sort of sleep, hormones, nutrition, and exercise. And we just sort of hit all 6 of those aspects.
So it's looking at the whole picture as opposed to just kind of only tapping into a few elements. You're kind of looking, because you explained biohacking. If for people that are listening, what why did you call it biohacking?
So it's a biohacking. It's a sort of a funny word for. I like to just say it's a bit more, being a bit more bespoke almost. So a little bit more precision rather than sort of a generic sort of approach to health, sort of fitness, nutrition, etc. And then with regards to some of the biohacking aspects, it's just utilizing some of the more advanced data tracking, more advanced sort of science and innovation that's out there. Because we all know at the sort of present time, medicine and, all the data, the research is generally about 15 to 20 years outdated.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. It's not a put down for that, but by the time it gets accepted into mainstream, it needs to go through so many rigorous sort of checks, and then it just basically things evolve way too quickly, and so we move away from that sort of aspect more towards where the sort of cutting science is.
And touching on that, actually, because previous podcast with Gareth, obviously, we've known each other for a while, but being in the education business, you're right, is they're still learning about the food pyramids and calorie in, calorie out, basic metabolic rate. Actually, I've made some notes about, because it's a buzzword and it flows me on to the next question. At the moment, since the pandemic, we've had a big shift in well-being. The word, dare I say it, holistic. It's not my favorite word, but where do you think the industry is going? That's a big question.
You mean in terms of the fitness industry?
Yeah.
I still think the fitness industry is still entrenched in its own dogmatic views of simplicity in nature. There's nothing wrong with that, to try and explain, the simplicity of things. But the problem is, in real life, it does not work and it does not equate, because the real life is far more complex. And so the more I look around, the more you see these things, and you mentioned it before, sort of the idea of carry in versus carry out is such a simplistic, idea for such a complex sort of solution which everyone's trying to seek. I always equate it to someone, if it was as simple as save more, spend less, then there would be no poverty in the world. But it doesn't work that way. It really, really doesn't. No billionaire has got to become a billionaire through saving less and spending more. They understand about inflation, they understand about everything else, and it's a concept that you can sell to people, but so people go, oh, well, that makes total sense, but the application really, really doesn't work. So I feel we're still really entrenched in that notion. And then on the other hand, when people are looking to branch away from that, we're still trying to point fingers and throw bricks at, other ideas that really probably are better rooted in where we should be going.
Okay, so touching on that while we're on this, let's just say there's a fascinating book, actually. I've just been listening to it on the way up from here, but it's called The Obesity Code. I don't know if you've
I read it.
So many things into perspective, because what do calories do for us? Not only just supply our body with energy, but they're heating it and so forth. So it's always industry, as we know, they are so adamant about reducing calories. And what my kind of question to you is what's your first point of call? Let's just say, I know that you go into lots of science, but if you are looking at a basic approach, what is the first kind of fundamental steps you work with a client with, and how do you start educating them on things like calorie intake and expenditure and so forth?
So, I mean, we still need to realize that the concept of calories in versus calorie out is the foundation of things.
Yeah.
But it's the idea of that, what defines the calories in and what defines, we seem to just believe that it's eating the food and then therefore the expenditure which you're doing. But if you look at skinny people by nature now, so we can now know that majority of skinny people who can eat thousands of calories a day and they get blood, they say, oh, someone's metabolism is quick, etc., etc. Well, we know now that looking at the gut biome, they have a high proportion of what they call like Akkermansia and bifidobacteria, and basically they can consume 1,000 calories, but the gut bacteria only absorb about 500 calories. And so, even looking at that, so the type of bacteria can define how many calories we're absorbing and how many we're just getting rid of anyway. So I do still start with the idea of calories in versus calories out, and then I take it from there and just say, look, it's not as simple as what you expect it is. But the biggest thing I find with my clients is the reason why I start with the basic of calories in versus calories out is majority of people still struggle with shaming themselves if they don't eat 100% all the time. And so I find from a mental point of view, if I can say right from the onset, it evolves as you go along, because it's like math, you start 1 + 1, you've got to. You can't just go straight to quantum physics. So we start off with this idea of calories in versus calories out. And then the idea that, even if they have that bag of crisps or something like that, I have so many paid clients and, who give themselves such a hard time. And they say, oh, I was really terrible. How was your week? Oh, it's terrible. I had 2 packs of crisps and I feel so bad. And I was like, well, in the whole grand scheme of the couple of days, did it work out? And they're like, well, yeah. So I said, well, why are you attaching such a negative connotation to that? And so I find a psychological point of view at the beginning is a very important part. Otherwise, we bash ourselves mentally for, not adhering 100% and all of this. So I find the simple calories in versus calories out is a good way to sort of overcome those obstacles, if that makes sense. So I think we need to start to walk before we run. So those are what I generally like. People need to realize that's the fundamentals of the building block, but then we need to evolve from there if we want long-term sustainability and to be able to keep these things off.
That's a great answer. You mentioned gut health. It's quite a big thing at the moment. I wanted to ask you about, number one, your views on gut health, and number two, your thoughts on starving the body over an X period of hours, whether it's I've got clients at the moment that have picked up on it and sometimes are starving themselves one day a week. So I just kind of want to ask you first question, gut health, what your view is on gut health, and secondly, starving the body.
Okay. Well, gut health, really. So I think in the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to realize that from a mechanistic point of view, optimal health is run obviously by having an immune system that's fully functional.
Yeah.
And from a mechanistic point of view, the gut pretty much drives immunity. And we're also realizing that gut health directly impacts fat cells. There's a direct communication. They intercommunicate between one another. When we have leaky gut, the sort of the lipopolysaccharides, they themselves get into the bloodstream and they can affect fat cells. So in terms of actual gut health, it will be, I believe, not just for the fitness, but for overall health, it'd be a big drive and fundamental sort of, especially, I think more and more people are realizing how important immune health is. And so sort of when we look at the aspects of gut and the bacteria, not many people know, and don't quote me on, I can't remember the actual facts or the actual figures, but it's in this ballpark. When you look at sort of our genetic makeup, like humans' DNA, we have the ability to code for about, I think it's about 30 or 40,000 proteins, which sounds a lot. But the average silkworm, I think, is about 55,000 proteins. So in terms of a coding for proteins, that's how pathetic the human species are. But we are such complex creatures. And the reason why is that we intermingle our DNA with the gut bacteria. And when we mix them up, we have the ability to code for about 2.5 million proteins. And so the same goes with digestive enzymes. So people who struggle, celiac, all these sort of gluten intolerances, lactose, and we try and take foods out. We try and, the usual, let's try and extreme ourselves, starve, let's try vegan, let's try carnivore. We try and extreme ourselves to a solution. The biggest reason there is that, again, from a digestive enzyme point of view, the human genome only can code, I think it's about a couple of hundred digestive enzymes, whereas then when we have the right type of bacteria in our gut, we've got access to about 5,000 or 8,000. And so with regards to starving ourselves, so you mean for a day, like fasting for a day?
Yeah, so fasting is it's an interesting subject, because I was directly quoting, but with a client question, is that they lead quite a stressful job, working late in the evenings and so on, and training them. They said, well, actually, this is my day. Let's say Wednesday, I'm not going to eat for the entire day. I have a lot of background with thought process that goes on. We're actually thinking this person's quite highly stressed, lack of sleep, the stress being itself, and then throwing themselves into a super busy, 11, 12-hour day with starving themselves. What's your thoughts on that?
So generally, when a lot of patients and clients come to me and they have these sort of ideas, and it goes for supplements, exercise, basically everything. The first fundamental thing I always ask them, I say, what is it you actually want to achieve by doing that? What is the idea behind this? And then number two, is there an easier and more efficient, less stressful way of achieving that same goal than the proposed idea that you want him to do? Yeah. And that goes the same for exercise, supplements, or anything. And so, but moving away from that sort of question, again, we need to be able to split things up into male and female, because when you look at sort of females and fasting and all of that, there's hardly any data. Pretty much most of the science is all done on men, so women don't really know that. When you look at, fasting, HIIT training, everything and anything scientific based is always based on men or postmenopausal women, because women scientists are, in inverted commas, a little bit lazy, and they don't want to do the hard graft when women throughout their menstrual cycle gets too complex. Yeah. So I'm not really a massive fan for fasting when it comes for women, and the reason why is the majority of women come and see me are, well, actually, from a statistical point of view, 81% of the world's women have hormonal issues somewhere along the line. And so when you've got their hormone in such imbalance or unhappiness, then fasting just pushes it a bit more further over the edge. But alluding to what your client and person is, men, it is a little bit more tolerant, but I mean, facts there is, if they're already depleted from a nervous system point of view, they lack in focus, lack in sleep, etc., then exactly that. You're going to put your body into more of a fight or flight sort of situation. I mean, I even have some of my clients actually, contrary to popular belief, eat carbs just before bedtime just to help them sleep, especially if they're stressed. The idea of not a big carb meal, but bit of honey, bit of sort of porridge, etc., and you just sort of get that sort of post carb release, makes them sleepy, and they get a really, really sound sort of good night's sleep. So I think overall it depends what their overall outcome is, and I think if you dig deep, you'll be able to break apart what they think they believe it's going to do for them and come up with a better solution. Yeah,
that's a good thing. And I think flipping this to personal trainers, I mean, as we've just talked about, the industry qualifications is far behind. Gareth and I talked about this in the sense, as soon as a PT qualifies, they probably last about a year in the industry before they leave. The information out there, we can't retain everything. We're guides as PTs, and necessarily because the internet has more information than us. So you do find now lots of clients now coming to you with so many different well-being trends and ideas. Should I fast? Should I do this? Should I eat more protein? Should I eat carbohydrates? Where do you think, for personal trainers, in your own views, should be heading when they're training clients? That's quite a big question, but where would you like to see it?
The realization that our degree, our qualification is literally just a piece of paper. And so, the idea of continual development and learning is probably the best thing. It's a massively tough industry, I think. Me personally, I think if I was put into that industry, I would, as a PT, I would look to actually niche myself. So I would look to not generalize into things. I would look to, only, train women between the ages of 30 and 45 who are mums and all the other sort of, and basically you get to know a niche a lot more.
Yeah.
And you what you do then is, and you ignore everyone else. You just do and learn everything with regards to that sort of niche. What sort of stress levels they have, what they're looking to achieve, what the average mum wants to do, and all of that, and really sort of start to investigate, start to get a good knowledge base on that, because you can always broaden from that. But I think some of the biggest things is everyone wants everything, and it's very, very difficult because it's such a wide pond, and then it's hard to add value.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to add value, because I can't remember it was a podcast the other day. I was listening to it on sales, and this guy was saying, if I was to offer let's use fitness. If I was to offer a basic fitness and nutrition program, you wouldn't be able to sell it more than online, like literally, I don't know, $27. I don't know, something like that, just 6 weeks. And then he said, look, if you were to offer it as a video thing, then you can do it at 97. But then if you had to say, look, this is for men between the ages of 30 and 55 who have hormone problems, all of a sudden someone's going, hang on a minute, that's me. Now you could probably sell that for 9,997. You know, but if you then took that person and said, look, you work in sales, you know, you sell cars, you work in sales, your average salary is around about 35,000. You love to wear blue light blocking glasses at night, and you've got a dog called Ralph. You got 10 people in the world are going, holy crap, that's me. And you literally then could sell that for about $5,000 because you're speaking exactly to that person.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's such a resonance there. And so if it was me, that's where I'd be looking into, because you offer far more value for the client you're serving, if that makes sense.
Great. I like that. Yeah, it's a really good point. Tracking. I noticed on your finger there, you're wearing a fitness tracking device.
Yeah.
We talked about just a second ago about calories. Track it, you know, start with calorie in, calorie out. Obviously there is depending on someone's full state of well-being. I know you look at 6 pillars, but if someone is quite highly stressed and strung, sometimes tracking can be 2 ends of the spectrum, can't it? It can be a good thing, and then it can also throw them the other way. What would you recommend, firstly, for like tracking for people? Do you track, for example, do you get people to track calories at the moment when you're working with them? Do you get them to note down what they're eating?
I try and make it as simple as possible for them, as streamlined. But I do, right at the beginning, like I said, I do get them just to track what they're eating so they can have an overall ballpark figure of what they're putting into their mouth.
Yeah.
But I do it not from, I try and explain to them, look, I do this not from the idea that I want to, again, it's that psychological, behavioral sort of punishment which we set upon ourselves. So I do it, the way I explain it is I say, this will give you an empowerment. So what I mean by that is, look, if you decide that tomorrow night you're going to have 3 or 4 beers, then from an empowerment point of view, because you have the idea you've been tracking certain things, then you literally could wake up on a Saturday morning, fast till lunchtime, have a steak and salad lunch, and then just be back on track again. So I look at it from I think it's how you deliver it. So the idea is not so I can keep an eye on them. The idea is so we can create a place of empowerment rather than a place of disempowerment.
Yeah, I very much on the same wavelength with that. Yeah.
And it's the same with sleep, I think.
Yeah.
You know, I know people can, and we need to sometimes be careful that we take something that can be so powerful and then sort of generalize it by saying people can become obsessed with it, you know, because the percentage of population who will really become obsessed with it is such a small percentage, but it's a really, really easy way for someone just to say, oh, well, don't become obsessed, you know, whereas in most 99% of the time, it's just a powerful tool. And I think as a coach, you can identify those who become obsessed, and therefore it's your job to actually help them with that. You know, I've got 1 or 2 clients before who've been obsessed with their weight, and you just have to call them out. You know, but you say, look, this is the reason why we focus on so many other things, because we know weight is not a good indicator of where we need to be going. And so, yes, people can become obsessed, but we need to be careful not to say, oh, well, let's not do that because, you know, 1 in a million person may do that. Well, then if that's the case, then it's your job as a coach to guide them and come up with ways to, you know, maneuver them in and around these sort of things. Otherwise we miss out on such, like I said, such empowering ways of helping people.
And I think you're right. I've had that experience with clients, and that's where being a PT, you have to over time be a people person, don't you? You have to adapt to their personalities, understand them, because if you don't have that ability, well, you're in the wrong industry in essence, because we are personal people. But body composition analysis, that's another way of tracking. But I've seen people in the past, that I've either worked with, and you're right, is just that empowerment. We use it as a tool, but, we're not using that word obsessed, but you can then start to direct them. And it's more about the small wins for them rather than having digital printouts to compare all the time. Actually, just go, you're doing really well with that. Necessarily different. We don't need to track that any longer, but it is like you said, they're all good tools. Coming back to that question, is there anything you recommend for, up and coming or technology out there for people to help them?
I do. As we move on, I think everyone should be tracking their sleep. Sleep's such a fundamental part with regards to, and again, when we look at this, again, we'll go back to the calories in versus calories out, etc. If your sleep's not good, then your hormones aren't good. So it makes no difference. Like, it really, really, really doesn't, So, and we've moved away from the idea that, oh, I sleep 8 hours a night, so therefore everything's perfect. Well, no, we don't know whether that's deep sleep, REM sleep. We don't know, light sleep. We don't know any of these aspects. And I think the exciting part is we can really start to quantify a lot of data, and it's really easy. Like, you literally within 30 seconds, you can just see that. And, it doesn't take us long. It's really easy to understand. And then when things aren't going so well, we're feeling a little bit under par, etc., then we can just look at the data and just make slight adjustments. Whether it's to have an earlier night, whether it's to take a specific supplement to increase, either deep sleep or REM sleep, or, whether we need to adjust diet, or maybe someone's overtraining.
And I think, is there a particular tool you're using to track?
So I use the Oura Ring.
Okay.
Now so I'm a big fan. I mean, when Whoop first came out, I was offered Whoop it was far long time ago to use it. And it's just a personal preference. I didn't get on with it. It's just a pain in the ass. I think majority of watches now track sleep, so your Fitbits, your Garmins, etc. So people don't have to spend large. Because the idea is it's the same as if you go to body composition, all these measurements, etc. Do they have to be accurate? Not really, because if we can just find trends, then that's great. We're not looking for massive specifics. Now, if you really want to dive deep, then I would suggest something like an Oura Ring. But it's not fundamental for people. I believe we should utilize things that are, because it's quite expensive, the Oura Ring too. Utilize things that are more attainable, and then just use things as more trend tracking, not necessarily with regards to absolute data.
Yeah. And I think actually coming back to sleep, it's that sleep hygiene, posted the other day, but it's talking about your routine before you go to bed. What you're doing, how many people, we've talked about this before, haven't we? Where your phone should be, should be plugged in next to your head or further away from you. So you're not going to use that as your go to bed before scrolling Instagram, Facebook, liking things and so forth. That how much does that put your head into not rested sleep? I think it's quite important. Dark rooms. We've talked about this, eye masks and so on. I've got a fairly living in a town, it's quite lit up. So without having darkened blinds, eye masks and so on are quite good as well, aren't they?
Yeah, cold environment as well. Scents are very, very good. One of the biggest things a lot of people don't realize is your sleep routine actually starts first thing in the morning, when you wake up. Consistently waking up at the same time, getting some sunshine, sun exposure first thing in the morning basically sets the whole hormones for the full day. So I would argue, your sleep routine would definitely start first thing in the morning upon waking up.
Yeah. I think that's also a really good takeaway. I just wanted to touch in, what's your thoughts on people going off, and there's lots of nutritionists and so on that go off and do some testing, things like, what, for example, bloods or stools and so forth. Is that something you work with laboratories to send off with your clients? Do you send off to get specific results for people?
Yeah, I do. So I do. I mean, I'm a practitioner of quite a few of the sort of online places like MediCheck, Thrive, etc.
Yeah.
I do run bloods for a lot of my clients. We do a lot of genetic testing as well. So we look at sort of epigenetics and sort of methylations and all those sort of things as well. Again, it just allows us to become a little bit more specific, a little bit more tailored for the individual. Again, I think as this moves more and more forward, we get more and more data, it will be where the future is led into. But I still think we need to realize that we still need to nail the basics before we start to do all of that as well. Like, I mean, I'm a massive fan of sort of biochemical testing, all of these sort of things, but we need to still remember that if the basics and the foundations aren't laid down, then it's really, it sounds great. It's a great, a lot of people use sounds a great sales tool, but if we're not nailing down sleep and fundamentals of life, balance and all the other sort of things, exercise, nutrition, and everything else, and it's just it's a pointless exercise.
Yeah, and I think you're right. An example, I'm not training any longer, but it was quite funny to see someone just, again, loved, I'm not going to use the word obsessed, loved that BCA machine. But they also were getting testing, they were paying everything, had all the gadgets. I mean, they had a ring on, a watch on, Fitbit on this arm, and pre-workout, I'm ready, Simon, let's go. Can we do the machine? I'm 55 now, I'm 42, now I'm 36. And and I go, whoa, just slow down. Are you sleeping? No, I'm not sleeping. You can tell. so that, going back to basics is a real important. And Gareth and I talked about this, and it is, people can just get caught up in so much information, and actually sometimes it's just getting moving is kind of the fundamental. And again, not overlooking or over analyzing. Sometimes it's just like you said, is just start looking at a week. What are you doing? What changes can you make? And try and just search out the small wins. If you've done something, like you said, crisps or something bad, you can always get back on the path again. So I think that's quite interesting.
I like to get a lot of my clients every day just to do a bit of sort of gratitude journaling too, just because I always ask them, every week, what are your three big wins? And so, but if they sort of reflect every day, even if it's for a couple of minutes, what am I grateful for, etc., it tends to stack up as well. You tend to get a much better sort of mindfulness with that, and no one's then coming back saying, I really don't know, because there's been quite a good bit of reflection there. So it only takes a couple of minutes, but I find it's a good, it turns the dial very, very well.
To touch on you, because you've put yourself through, I just wanted your body through some pretty epic challenges, haven't you? Yeah. Let's just talk about that, because all I'm going to say is that I remember seeing you in a gym changing room, and it almost looked like you were just knocked out, chiseled. And then just briefly touch on kind of the stuff from bodybuilding competitions to what other crazy stuff have you put yourself through, without scaring people listening.
I'm from young, I've always been a sort of N=1 experimenter. So I love to experiment on myself, where it's basically anything from anything. Because I find then I have a better idea of what I can help people and clients and patients with, etc. But yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate to have played sort of rugby, international rugby. I've played overseas and everywhere else. So when that sort of came to the end, I was playing some sevens and I was getting fit for a sevens tournament. And I said to a coach, because I've always got coaches. So, you know, whatever endeavor I'm going in to, I'm always finding a coach. It's just find someone who's done something, who's way ahead of you in the game, and just learn from them. I mean, it's the fastest way to get from A to B. And so I asked her, I said, I'm getting really lean for rugby. So I've never done a bodybuilding competition. What do you think? She's like, hell yeah. So we gave, I think it was about 14 or 15 weeks. And so I've known her for a while. She's very gifted with regards to the bodybuilding aspect. It's not the typical sort of chicken, broccoli and rice and everything else. So she's very, very smart, very, very, you know, she's up there with the cutting edge stuff. So I was happy to just say, look, you know, I'll put everything into you. I'll just do whatever you tell me. And so that was an insane journey.
Can I just add, you your first bodybuilding competition, didn't you just?
It was my first.
You won.
Yeah, I won. Yeah, so I stepped up.
You skipped that part.
Yeah. Okay. So stepped up on stage one. Invited to go to the British Champions. I was touted by the judges actually to actually take home the British Championship, but the next 3 days I spent in A&E, so it didn't.
I remember well.
So that was a bit of a shame, but you know, you learn a lot of things. And then once I'd done that, for the next year, I was like, right, what do I hate doing? What's something that's I really, really, because it's quite easy. You know, when I choose things, I say, I need to push myself. So I was like, right, I hate running. So I was like, right, okay, let me see if I can find a race. And so it was a friend of mine who convinced me to join. It's called the Coastal Challenge. It's a 250k race across the Costa Rican jungle.
Most people listen to this go, oh, I'm just going to do a marathon.
And so she's like, yeah, let's do this. I was like, oh, amazing. So we signed up, and then a week later she bowed out, and I was like, oh, I'm going to do it anyway. And so I had to find a coach for this. And so it pretty much went like this. I got in contact with a lot of people, and they were like, because there's almost like a stepping stone. So there's a 250k race across the Sahara called the Marathon des Sables. But generally people do that first before they even do the other one, which I'm doing. So I spoke to a couple of coaches, and this was a typical conversation. They're like, oh, wow, congratulations, you got in. I was like, yeah, really excited. Because there's only like 140 people, and most of them are professionals. And they were like, oh, amazing. So how many multi-stage races have you run? And I was like, none. I'm like, okay. How many 100-milers have you run? I was like, none. I'm like, Ironman? I was like, no. Like marathon? I was like, no. I was like, look, I've not even done a 10k race. And and they were like, oh, all right, well, okay, well, if we plan for in a year's time, I was like, well, we've got 12 weeks, that's it. And so majority of people just kind of put the phone down, or like, they were like, no chance. And then I was very fortuitous. There's a guy called Alex Viada, who is an amazing high-end coach who's coined the term hybrid athlete. So if you go check out Alex Viada, like, he is at the pinnacle. And so it's very fortuitous. He on Instagram just randomly said, I've got for the first time in like 9 months, got a place for coach for client. And I was like, oh my God. So I messaged him and I explained it, and he was like, mate, you're that shit crazy, but I love it. He said, I love it. He said, I can't guarantee anything, but I'll move heaven and earth. And so that's how it started. And so it was 12 weeks of hell. The race itself was hell. And I think only about half the people finished. As crazy as it sounds, I think I finished like 14th or 15th out of the men, but I think that's only because most of them just didn't finish.
Wow.
So yeah, that was one of the nuts things.
Not anything else coming up that's a bit crazy?
They've got a similar sort of race on Everest. It's called the Everest Trail. So that probably I will see maybe December.
We'll need to do it again, interview, see how you're getting on. To close up, I just wanted to kind of give some people some takeaways. And I mean, it's a huge subject, but what's your kind of, I know using your 6 pillars, what would you give people as takeaways, whether it's weight loss or coming into this industry? What's your kind of first points of takeaways so people are listening can get from the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're first coming into this industry, just be coachable. Even though you're going to be a coach, be coachable yourself. Be sort of pliable. Absorb, listen to podcasts. Don't take things for face value, and just ask questions. I think if you can be inquisitive and ask enough questions, but ask the right questions, then you get the correct answers. I think so many people ask such poor questions, and it's not just is in all facets. And just sort of, just don't be afraid to reach out to loads and loads of different people and just get loads of different opinions. And then just, like I said, niche into where you find a bit of passion.
Yeah.
With regards to health and wellness, realize that unfortunately where we are, it's very boring to say you have to just have, exercise, nutrition and all that. No one wants to do the boring things, but unfortunately they're the things that work. But it's consistency that actually gets there. But in order to sell people in this world we are now, that's why all these shiny coins happen. So I think there's nothing wrong with shiny coins, but realize you still got to knock the fundamentals out first. And so, like I said, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not looking after your own sort of life balance, if you're not looking after your own nutrition and exercise, then the shiny coin, and there's nothing wrong with shiny coins. I love shiny coins. It's those shiny coins aren't going to serve you.
Great. 2 books, 2 podcasts. What would you recommend? What you're reading?
Oh, at this present time.
Apart from Harry Potter on the bookshelf.
Harry Potter rocks, mate. First edition. So mine's a little bit eclectic. So I am reading Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson.
Okay, I'll put links to that. Yeah.
Also, just listening to Life Force by Tony Robbins.
Nice. Okay. Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of him because he is, again, at the forefront of health, again, biohacking, etc. Podcasts. So, it's a really good question. This podcast, of course, mate, this is going to go top of my list naturally. My podcasts actually are one's called We Study Billionaires.
Nice. Okay. I've not heard of that.
I love that. And then Alex Hormozy, The Game.
Yes. Okay. Great. Those are good. I'll put reference to them. I'm always up
the
for
third
that.
one. The third one is the Fitness Coach Freedom Podcast.
Perfect. It's always helpful. And as this podcast goes, this is the plan: is to get community people together, talking, get different experts on. I especially don't know everything, so it's great to have you on board. And thanks for your time.
Mate, my pleasure. Anytime, mate. You know that.